So, welcome everyone to Becker's Webinar Wednesday Beyond the Therapy Room, using therapeutic strategies through play to support all children. And today we are delighted to have this amazing panel group with us so that we can really finish what we started in January with a 5-part webinar series diving into all things regulation, hopefully leading to self-regulation. But we know that is a complex topic, and the best way to approach it with young children is by weaving it into play. So I'm going to ask this of everyone as you continue to join. How do you want the children in your care to feel while they're with you? Go ahead and put that into the chat, but also keep it in your mind. Pardon the background noise as we move through this first part. So we are going to have a certificate available to you at the end of the webinar. There will be an evaluation with 4 quick questions. The recording will be made available and posted on our YouTube channel. You can get the certificate from the recording as well. It's down in the comments section. We have tons of resources connected to this. Terry really loaded our landing page. Thank you, Terry from Becker's. We have all of the juicy goodness from our earlier 4 webinars, as well as some really specific tools that we created for this one on that landing page. So please revisit it after the fact so that you can make the most use out of those. And again, we welcome your feedback. The questions that you're going to hear us ask the panelists actually came from the questions that you've been sending in after your evaluations from our prior webinars. So now let's get right to it. Who are our guests? We are so excited to have Sheila Crow back, a speech and language pathologist from Dot to Dot Pediatric Speech. Christian Bellissimo from his own practice, Christian Bellissimo. He is a registered play therapist as well as an author, speaker, and trainer. And then I'm going to move this down so I can see your faces. And then we have Katie Bailey, a preschool teacher at Free Union Country School. Devin Delaney, Virginia Preschool Initiative teacher at Kilby Elementary School. Please wave when we call your name so we see you. Kaylee Harpole, Early Childhood Special Education Services at McHarg Elementary School. And then Rachel is joining me from the Becker's education team as Christine and Kathy are off enjoying PTO today. So welcome, everybody. I would like to take just a minute to center us, as we always do in the beginning of our sessions, with a mindfulness moment. And this practice is actually sometimes called a 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique, or a tour of the senses. So I'm just going to start with stretching your body so you feel comfortable. My go-to is to sweep the air up, lift my chin back. Take a deep breath in, and then blow it out. Bringing calm to our thoughts, kindness to our words, and love in our heart. So as we start this tour, let's see if we can name 5 things that you can see. So just look around you, take a moment to spot 5 things in your immediate environment, whether it's the computer in front of you or a cherished family photo on your desk. The goal is really to see the details, the color, form, and texture. So just look when I say see, 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 and see. And then maybe close your eyes and name 4 things that you can hear. They could be anything from the rain hitting your window or the fire truck that just went outside my window, people talking in the distance. Try to isolate, hear, 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 hear. And then name 3 things just in your mind that you can feel. Concentrate on that sense of touch to further ground yourself. Become aware of 3 things that you can feel. It could be the fabric on your skin, the breeze from the AC vent, or the feeling of your body supported in your chair. Feel, feel, feel. And then name 2 things you can smell. Take a deep breath. See if you can find two distinct aromas. Maybe it's your fresh coffee. Maybe you bring your hands to your nose and it's the scent of hand soap or hand lotion. Smell, smell. And finally, focus on your sense of taste. Maybe you want to take a sip of coffee or water, or simply focus on the lingering flavor of toothpaste in your mouth. But centering on one final sense completes the tour of the senses and firmly brings you back to the present moment. So today we are going to focus on the following learning outcomes. I jokingly had all of them as love the child, and I still think that fits, Rachel. But we are going to get a little more specific, and we're going to understand the connection between our own mindset and our big picture purpose, and then how we respond to children in our care. We're going to recognize the importance of observing the child and the learning environment through a sensory lens to fully understand children's behaviors. We're going to reflect on multimodal therapeutic strategies that can be implemented through play in your unique setting. So we're going to start with this reflection on what is your big picture purpose? And that's why we invited all of you to think about how you want children to feel while they're with you. As a Becker's education team, we're going to manifest having an early childhood center again one day. But we came up with our own kind of statement of purpose as education professionals. And it goes like this. As early childhood professionals, our purpose is to nurture the development of every child by creating environments and building relationships rooted in safety, trust, and love. We believe that children thrive when they feel seen, heard, and valued. And we are committed to fostering a community where each child feels safe to explore, express, and make mistakes without fear, love just as they are and encouraged to grow into their unique beings, trusted and respected as capable individuals with their own perspectives and ideas, competent in their ability to problem solve, express themselves, and build meaningful relationships, confident in their strengths and resilient in the face of challenges, curious about the world around them, free to wonder, ask questions, and engage in joyful discovery. And finally, a deep sense of belonging to their classroom, their community, and the broader world. Through responsive caregiving, intentional teaching, and reflective practice, we strive to build a foundation of well-being and lifelong learning. And we recognize that honoring the whole child also means honoring the whole family and the unique cultural and lived experiences that each child brings. This work is both a calling and a responsibility, and every day we aim to show up with compassion and commitment to grow alongside the children we serve and to advocate for a future where every child has the opportunity to flourish. And so while we aren't going to take the time in this experience, for you to develop maybe your own big picture, big statement of purpose, we hope that reflecting on the words of how you want children to feel, as well as maybe what this could be developed into, can help anchor you as we start to discuss how we respond to children and support them in their learning environments. We can facilitate this mindset shift, this centering of our big purpose, by making the following 4 commitments. I choose to love the child unconditionally. Hopefully you can too. I choose to recognize all behavior as communication and see attention-seeking behavior as connection-seeking behavior. I choose to believe that every person, child and adult, is doing the best that they can in any given moment with the skills and resources available to them in that moment. That one is critical. And I choose to be open to rethinking long-held practices and beliefs in order to serve the best interests of each child and the classroom, school, family, community. So, with our big picture purpose in mind and these core commitments, we can begin to observe the child, observe the learning environment, and then make changes and implement new practices. Rachel, can you walk us through those steps?
Definitely. Thanks so much, Erin. So once we have a better understanding of our own sensory needs, we can dig deeper into our students' individual sensory needs and stimuli. So how can we do that? First, let's involve family members and caregivers. A getting to know you questionnaire either at the beginning of the school year or, sometimes we forget to do that and we need to do that when times get tough, so that we can better understand that child's perspective outside of school. What are their preferences through their daily routine? How are they interacting within their home environment? How are they interacting within the community? And then we want to observe them within our environment, so we can better understand them throughout the day. Are there specific sensory stimuli that they have different responses to? How are they interacting with peers? How are they interacting with different adults? And one thing that can aid to help that is doing a sensory profile. So that's here at the bottom, that getting to know you questionnaire for family members and caregivers, as well as a sensory profile. I highly encourage you to involve those caregivers and family members so that everybody can have a better understanding of those individual sensory needs. So once we have a better understanding of our individual students' needs, we need to understand what our classroom is capable of. So going around the room, looking at all of those different center areas throughout the day, and how are they addressing each of those different sensory domains. So interoceptive needs, hungry, thirsty, tired, hot, or cold. As adults, we are able to access my water bottle when I'm thirsty, but are all of your students able to access their needs, or are they able to communicate that with you? Because sometimes they don't even know that they're hangry or tired, right? So how can we help them and facilitate that? What about those proprioceptive and vestibular needs? I know that within the classrooms I've worked in, the kids that have the biggest need for big body movement, proprioceptive and vestibular sensory needs, are the ones that often have the biggest behaviors. So how are we creating an environment where not only during music and movement time and outside time, but throughout the day, they are able to safely move their bodies, not just climb up on top of the table and run away from you. So how can we facilitate that within our classroom setting? Visual needs, right? Sometimes we're sensitive to lights. I don't know about you, but I often turn off the big lights and I just have lamps on. So if you've got that fluorescent lighting in the room that you're used to, you may have students that aren't, that we need to modify that for. What about tactile needs, touch? Do you have lots of different textures throughout all your center areas that your students can access throughout the day? Do you have students that may have some aversion to specific textures? Maybe those art activities, you need to make sure you've got some modifications for them because they're not going to want to touch that finger paint. We want everybody to be able to access throughout the day and be comfortable. Auditory needs. Do we have times for where we can be loud? Times where it needs to be quieter? What about a student that has sensitivity to those sounds? Are they able to access noise canceling headphones when they need them? Do they know how to use them? Are they comfortable? All of those needs. Olfactory smells. Sometimes as adults, our sensory needs related to smells are completely different. You may have one adult that loves that Glade plug-in and another one that it gives a headache. Same situation for your students. So if you are coming in and you're wearing perfume or you've got Bath and Body Works soap that you love, that's great, but sometimes that's not always appropriate for our students, and we need to really dig deeper in ourselves and how that works. Stinky diaper pail. We adjust to it because we've been working with it for 15 years, but you may have a kid that just can't take it. So how are we looking for those triggers for our students? And then with that gustatory, that taste piece, are we respecting everyone's preferences, and not just their preferences, but their needs? Sometimes they're just not going to try that nude food. It's okay to be respectful of that, but at the same time, when we have opportunities to introduce new tastes, we're doing so in a non-threatening manner. So down at the bottom here, we have that learning environment sensory audit that really helps you dig deep into your classroom setting and figure out what is your classroom offering sensory wise, and then maybe what can you add to it.
I just side note, it's 8 pages. It goes through
It's
all
deep.
of the different sensory domains, and you're really thinking about the child's experience individually, collectively, in play centers, in transitions. It's, I think, hopefully, you're going to let us know a helpful tool to walk through that impact of all the different sensory inputs.
So once you've done that sensory audit and you've really dug deep into what sensory opportunities you have in your classroom, what sensory avoidant things you may need to create, then you're really going to look at your classroom design. This is one of my favorite things. So how do I need to adjust my environment to better help my students? We already talked about meeting those movement needs. Do I have a space in my classroom where it's appropriate for students to do big body movement? Am I explicitly teaching them those appropriate big body movements throughout the school day? Because they're not just going to know what to do right away. We have to really teach it. Then, do I also have a space for self-regulation where my students can go? Often we're calling that a cozy corner, a calm down area. And not only that, but do I have a space where we can co-regulate together? Because we know that co-regulation needs to occur before we're able to do self-regulation on our own. We often have maybe a tent or a cube that is for an individual student. We're not able to get in there with them. So am I able to create some type of environment where I can go and co-regulate with my students at the same time? So if you want to dig deeper into this, we did a webinar in January that was the self-regulation in early childhood, and that link is here at the bottom as well.
Awesome. So we centered this conversation around play. Why play, right? There's lots of different opportunities when we connect with children. So why are we focusing this on play? This is just a sampling of the reason, but play is the way, right? I don't care which author, which expert, which child development person you go to. Play is how children learn best. Play is how we're hardwired as human beings. So the more that we can infuse the strategies to connect children's regulation through play, the more success we're going to have. And that makes me so happy to see 3 educators and 2 clinical professions being like, yes, play is the way. So thank you so much. And you're going to get your own answers in here as we go along. So this is just an overview of some of the key points when we had our sessions with Christian, Sheila, and Kelsey. But coming from that play therapy lens, what are some of the key things to think about, right? Attunement is first. Be present and attuned to the child's needs and the felt experience in the room with the child. Be near them with an open body position. Let the child lead the play. It's child-led play, child choice play. And it's not the time then to correct a child. That's a snake, not a this. That's something upside down. It's the child play. They get to own the whole experience. You're going to describe their play as a choice or a decision. And really hard for us educators, we're going to try not to ask questions. And instead, when a child asks us questions, what should I do with this? What should I wear? Who should it be? We're going to return the responsibility back to the child and say, I think that's something you can choose. You tell me. We're going to acknowledge their effort and provide descriptive praise as they go along. And we're going to offer just enough help, that zone of proximal development, that they can build that frustration tolerance, but ultimately they are successful in completing that desired task. And then the one we all are focused on, because it has to start in play, is we're going to set and enforce limits on unsafe, but then also inappropriate, because we can have rules around play centers and breaking toys, so unsafe for the materials. So that once we then set limits outside of a play context, we'll have a greater chance for success because it will be introduced during play. Then we learn from the occupational therapy lens. This is all things senses, all things motor, gross motor. We really focused on this sensory experience of the child, but then the whole group of children in learning environments. And so there's also an educator involved in the learning environments. And we learned that with such a different vast group of people together, learning and living together, there are going to be different sensory needs. And how do we accommodate when there's mismatch? You want more, I want less. And then that happens times however many children or adults are in that space. So we can use this construct for providing a safe escape. That doesn't actually mean physically leaving the space. So a safe escape means providing the tools and resources so that, let's say, we're playing with some of the loud manipulatives. I use the Lego example because for some children, you know, the big bucket of Legos, and when you dig in there, it goes like it's a loud sound. And sometimes the kids really like to dig. Like they're like, oh no, I didn't find it yet. And then and it's really, really loud, right? So another child could just not be handling that sound in that moment. So when we're playing with the Legos at the Table Toy Center, if the noise is so loud and bothers you, then you can go get your noise canceling headphones or choose another play center, right? And so that same construct could be appropriate for adults or children in the environment. And then the follow up to that is to understand that behavior is often coming through a sensory lens, or is it at the very least influenced by sensory? And there's a difference between a behavior that meets a sensory need and the actual sensory need itself. And really trying to understand the child. That's what Rachel referenced. Observe the child so that we can see what are they craving more or less of. And then we're better um, resourced to observe their behavior as, oh, this is a maladaptive. That's behavior that's meeting a sensory need in this particular situation. But then we can change. We can change our response and change the environments to provide opportunities to safely meet those sensory needs across domains. Rita, I love that question. How important is it to have noise canceling headphones in the classroom? Um, Very. I think you're going to see everyone here say yes. And I'm just going to jump in if something really matches in the moment to a question that you have. Otherwise, we'll hold them to the panelist Q&A. But in regard to headphones, the critical piece there is to introduce them outside of a moment of distress, outside of a moment of auditory overwhelm, to instead introduce, like, hey, go over, how does it feel to have these on? Every child gets an opportunity. How do they feel when they have them on? They get to use them during play just to get used to what's the pressure on my head? How does it feel around my ears? Like all of that. So then they're used to that. So then they're in a moment of, whoa, I really actually need them to reduce the auditory input. Then they're more likely to go and use them. But if they're in a moment of distress in that moment, and then you try to put headphones on them, it's less likely that they will feel like that's a good solution in the moment. So then finally, from Sheila's wheelhouse and a speech and language therapy lens, we learned that one of the most critical things you can do is use visuals as often as you can and in many different contexts. So we know we have a visual daily schedule. We have expectations. We have routines. We have a now next chart. We have choices and problem solving options. But the more visual tools we can use to support children, the more successful they're going to be in any of these strategies. And I loved, Sheila, your statement from your session with us. Visuals don't have a tone of voice. I think that's magical. And because clearly children will know what I'm trying to say. I'm an animated person, right? And maybe other educators are too, they're going to hear something, right, in my tone. So the more that I can use visuals, the more likely the direct message will get across. Be clear and direct. Identify something concrete that you're seeing or hearing. Provide that specific language or vocabulary around that observation, and then provide a support or a tool around what's happening. Model, 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 practice, practice, practice during play. So we're modeling our own response. I'm using that language and vocabulary about how I'm feeling, how I'm responding, and then also practicing with the child during their play. And then finally, pause. Children need a beat. Adults need a beat. Children need a beat and then probably another beat to really figure out, oh, yeah, no, there's something coming back to me. And often we're in a rush to meet the demands of the day and our schedules and don't always give them the due pause that they deserve. So again, for all three of these, we had sessions dedicated to their expertise. Please go back and review them. But we're so happy that you've come back to join us here. I should mention Kelsey is in Australia now. So this time did not work for them, but we're happy to be able to bring the expertise back. So taking all of this information, how can we adapt our play centers, not with like a specific activity to do in the play center, but like what materials, what tools, what changes can we make so that no matter the area the child chooses to play in, there are ways to meet different sensory input preferences in those play areas. So what does that mean? In your art center, try either just taking away the chairs from the regular sitting table or offering a standing table, something a little bit higher, that then when the children are engaged in art experiences, they can get their whole body involved when they're working on the table. Maybe they're doing bilateral scribbling, but more of their body can be engaged when they're not isolated to a chair. And then speaking of moving that whole body, utilize vertical play surfaces. This is magical if you haven't tried it already, but think about having windows, walls. What are magnetic surfaces? What are whiteboard surfaces? Glass, like if you have glass walls as separators. How can you turn that into a play surface? So if it's magnetic, you can build out with your magnetiles instead of building up. Tons of exploration there. If you have Play-Doh, you can put it on that glass surface or that whiteboard, spread it out, and then do different collages along that surface. But think about how can we take things off the table, which is really where children are used to this. I'm sitting, I have a certain motion with my arms and hands. Can I go underneath a table and put butcher paper underneath and then do painting or a different art? So think about your surfaces and switch it up. And then in those areas, provide different multisensory tools. So you might add scents to your Play-Doh or other sensory bases. And if you can, this is one of the hardest things for educators to control, but if you have support from others to adjust the light in the room, but also in different parts of the room. So could it be that if we don't have the fluorescent overhead lights, can we have different lamps, different area lights in different spaces? And then do children have any control over if it's too bright over here? What can I do? Is there like a partition I can put up? Can I put something over it or in front of it, a screen? Can I add light? So really think about how children can have agency and control in adjusting light, since that's a really big influence. Add options for listening in your library center so it's not just looking and visual. And then music. And I do want to add, though, intentional music. Sometimes there's a reflex to put music on all the time in the classroom and it's background, but then it becomes something that actually just gets ignored and is distracting versus an intentional use of music. So we are hardwired, we're musical beings, it's in us. So if we intentionally incorporate music that goes along with what we're trying to facilitate, that's powerful. So these are ones that I'm not going to click on, but they're already in our Shopbecker universe at our resource cafe. So I just wanted to provide the links and then a quick kind of description of what it is. So easel painting to music. Children can wear the headphones. If you have Bluetooth headphones, if you have wired headphones, that way it can be specific to the individual child. And you can explore with different types of music and then how they paint or draw or have another creative expression to that music. Plunger painting drumming is so much fun if you've never tried this. I saw a couple faces like, what in the world is that? But especially if you have a long-handled plunger and then you have drumming music, the two go hand in hand. And if you don't want to do butcher paper outside, you can do like a homemade chalk paint mixture. And then you just put the plunger in that and you do it right on the sidewalk. So much fun. Then there's ones for high energy art release. That's that bilateral scribbling like this. You could do it on a table, you could do it on a wall, but that's great for getting out that high energy whole body output. And then low energy for calm observational drawing, maybe through a microscope, magnifying glass. Then bring the outside in. We are heavily influenced by nature. So we have a lot of activities and resources around biophilia and biophilic design. And finally, that sensory bin play. So everything related to OT about adjusting and adapting, having the resources there so that children who are averse, they have tools to modify. So like if it's too sticky, then I have a bowl of soapy water right next to it. If it's this, then I have an opportunity to test it up to my tolerance level. And then I have a way to escape it. I can clean it, I can wash it off, so I can do it to my comfort level. I'm going to pause, Rachel, and read the room and say, was there anything related to that before we get into our in the moment? Okay, I think we're good. This is the meat before we get into the wisdom of the people in the room, which is a lot of your questions regarded were regarding what do I do in the moment? So what do I do when this happens, when this child then triggers this one, when this one. So we intentionally spent this whole first 30 minutes about protective, about preemptive, proactive, all the P's, right? These are the things that you can do to prevent it. These are best practices. This is how we can meet a variety of needs. Even when you do all of that, you will have a need to be responsive in the moment. And we have a way of teaching that, which is to pause, notice, and intentionally choose your response. So this quote comes from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And the reason why we had you reflect on your bigger purpose is because that's going to come into play here. We want to have you call to mind any situation where it's a child's behavior is at odds with what the group is trying to do or is unsafe or just something that is happening where you need to interrupt the behavior to do something else. So the first thing we can do is to pause and take a mindful breath. A mindful breath is the critical piece, even if it's in a short moment. And then to notice, as the adult caregiver, what was triggered inside of you. What are your body's sensations? Did I tense up? Did my face show exactly what I was thinking and immediately go to stink face? Was I shocked and scared or horrified? If you saw me react to Christian, I've seen it a million times. And it's so hard not to because that's what happened in my body. My body was startled, right? And then I react. So it's to notice what about the behavior is triggering something inside me. What is happening to my body sensations? And then it's, oh, okay, it was alarm, it was fear, like what was being, it was annoyance is a lot of the times what was being triggered inside me. What are my body sensations telling me? And then my choose is where, what am I trying to accomplish in this moment? Is my goal compliance to the activity? Is my goal, what is my goal? So hopefully your goal, again, this is just to kind of show it, but I want the child to feel safe. I want them to feel trusted. I want them to feel loved. So if I go back to this, choose a mindful response that aligns with your big picture goals. If your immediate response is to exclude the child, to put them in a different area, to physically stop their behavior, maybe to remove them, like think about what your instinctual reaction might be versus your intentional response. And hopefully, we can learn from some of these questions that we're about to dive into how to take a mindful response approach instead of this very reactionary, less thought out approach. Does that make sense? You guys were nodding your heads a little bit there. How are we doing with this pause, notice, choose? Because I'm actually going to stop sharing so that I can see everybody even better. How do we feel about that pause, notice, choose? Does that make sense where we are so far in the conversation?
Definitely.
Okay, awesome. I saw a hand and then it went back down. So I was just going to say, Rachel's going to kick us off with questions. Again, we had so many in advance that we already have a lot of questions. But we would love for you to add questions. So as we ask and answer one, if you have a follow-up, please put it in the chat. And we're going to try to filter those in into the right moment as a follow-up. So Rachel, take it away.
Yeah, we're going to start with really digging deeper into ourselves a little bit. And my first question is actually going to be for Katie. And it's, how does knowing your own sensory preferences help you support your students?
Ooh, such a good question. I think one that I relate to a lot being in a preschool classroom where I'm pretty sound sensitive. And if you've been in a preschool classroom, whoo, it can get loud. And I guess the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the importance of knowing kind of your own sensory profile is empathy. Because if you understand the way that your sensory needs impact your ability to process information or make a quick decision, or even just like, I don't know, get yourself through your day. Like if you're having a hard day sensory wise, your day is going to be harder. And I think working with young children, knowing that, okay, this little person is growing. They're probably hungry, because they're, in my case, 3 or 4, they're probably hungry. But they're like experiencing maybe something that is making them feel really flooded, right? So the information I'm trying to give them, if I am trying to speak to them or I'm raising my voice and they're really sound sensitive, that's not going to work. I often think about how like the empathy of like figuring out how you experience sensory things can also make you more curious about how your students experience things. And if you're curious about your students, I think they respond to that. They know they our preschoolers, they're so smart. They're the smartest people in the room. And they know if I am genuinely curious about what they're experiencing. And if I am, they respond accordingly. The other thing I would say is that if I have unmet needs, I'm going to have a harder time meeting the needs of my students. So knowing my own sensory needs means that I can take care of myself so I can better take care of them. So it's one of the reasons why we talk about sensory stuff so much with our students so that they know that the sort of the language around sensory input is something that's a common language because we're all experiencing sensory stuff, whether it's overwhelm or whether I'm seeking some sort of different sensation, because actually that would help me calm down. So I definitely encourage everybody, if you haven't ever kind of thought about your own sensory profile, it's really worth your time. Definitely.
Well, I think empathy is that key word that I heard you say, and that when you have empathy and you're sharing that and showing that with them, then they become more accepting and empathetic to other sensory needs as well as your own.
Yeah, they respond so immediately to that, and
Mhm.
it's really wonderful to see.
Thanks for sharing. I appreciate it. All right, my next one is for Sheila. Sheila, how do you handle routines when a child regularly ignores direction? This could be due to communication difficulties or another reason.
Also, a great question. A very loaded question for a very short amount of time. Thanks.
It's a big one.
Okay,
I want,
so
if you guys are paying attention in reactions, raise your hand, give a thumbs up if this applies to you. Ignoring, yeah,
Ignore.
yeah. Okay,
okay,
please.
so the first thing that I would say from a therapeutic lens is that we want to obviously parse out what is actually happening for our student, right? Are they having difficulty with receptive language? Are they having difficulty with the vocabulary you're presenting? Are they having difficulty with attention or focus? Are they having a nervous system response that is interfering? Are they a student that struggles with transitions in general, right? Transitions are hard for all of us. So we want to break that down. Do they have trouble with their working memory? And so they can't hold the information. Do they have motor planning issues? So that's kind of the first area we have to observe and figure out what is it that is getting in the way of what they're experiencing. And then just from a practical, obviously, then in therapy, we're going to be working on those and hopefully supporting teachers and other parts of their team in supporting any areas we've identified. But in general, in just thinking about how do we do this day to day, in and out, all the time, I would say that we want to get down on a child's level. This is my favorite strategy, right? Get down on their level. And we want to somehow use something in ourselves to support their attention and focus. So change your pitch, change your tone, sing it as a song. Let's see if we can shift them with our own shift in our nonverbal cueing, right? We can use a lot of that there. Hand them an object to help them transition. Give them something that helps them understand the transition, right? It's snack time. I'm going to hand you your cup so that you can bring it to the table, something that makes logical sense for them. Use visuals. That was my biggie, right? Use visuals, have photos, have pictures, have symbols that help them know what's coming next. If they're struggling with the transition, use a visual timer. All of those are really just functional ways. And of course, we are teaching receptive language, auditory processing, executive function in play all day, every day. So we're going to strengthen those skills within the context of play. All right, that was a lot.
That was so helpful. It was a lot, but that it's all about us responding, right? So first looking what might be at the core, but then what are things that we can do to respond supportively in the moment. So speaking of an intentional, mindful response, Kaylee, how do you stay calm and consistent when a child reacts strongly, and you can infer what does reacting strongly mean to you, either during play or another part of the daily routine?
Yeah, so I love that you are using the word mindful because really, when you're in those situations, it's all about your mindset going into it. So I like to think of it from a perspective of not taking it personally because that reaction to that boundary is not about you. It's not about me. It's about what the child is going through. And I like to think of this quote that I heard. It's they aren't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. So knowing that we're dealing with young children and going into certain situations, we can anticipate reactions to that. So if you know that child, you've observed that child, you know that there are going to be certain situations that are more difficult for them. So anticipating that, mentally preparing for that, and how you're going to respond in that situation. Children are still learning. They haven't mastered those skills. So that's what we're there for, to teach those skills. So if a child is up here and I'm maintaining my level of calm, the goal is for them to come down to my level, not for me to go to theirs. And I also know that in my mindset in that situation, by being consistent and continuously following through, not only is that child going to expect me to be consistent every time, but also trust that I'm going to show them what they can do instead to be successful in that situation.
Wow.
Hope that answers.
Yeah, no, it was super helpful. Thank you. And I'm going to immediately go right to Christian because I think he has a similar, but then a unique perspective on how do you respond when a child reacts strongly to a limit?
Sure. I probably would have opened with what Kaylee just shared. That was great information. I kind of think of that circumstance as from a neuro standpoint, right? That we as the adult are the regulators, right? Children are still learning to cope with strong feelings. And so we as the adult have to be mindful and understand our role, which is to help the child get regulated. That Bruce Perry, anyone who's familiar, if you're not, look him up. But he has a great quote that says, regulate before reasoning. So that is our priority, is that we have to remain calm, because if we don't remain calm, then we are going to escalate the child and intensify the strength of their feeling. So we need to remain calm. It's not always easy to do. Sometimes I think it takes experience, because there are situations that really can elicit a strong reaction from ourselves. So we have to remember our role, which is to help the child get regulated. That may mean start also acknowledging and legitimizing the child's feeling in that moment. I know you're having a strong feeling. I know you're mad, but you chose to throw the blocks again. So let's go to the calm down area, right? Get the child regulated, sit and help the child get regulated before you engage in any type of cognitive strategy of problem solving. I think it's also important to remember, piggybacking on aggressive play or aggressive behavior, a lot of that stems from a child that needs to learn a new social skill. I think a lot of physical aggression, what influences that is a child that doesn't have a social skill that needs to be developed. And that's also our responsibility. And our role is to coach children and help them learn new skills, right? Instead of pushing your friend, prompt them, ask your friend for the block back or ask for a turn, because a lot of that behavior is the result of that impulsive reaction in children.
Yeah, I heard a couple of, yeah, hearts, right? Good stuff. And I'm curious for both of your advice on this concept of like rehearsing your response. So I heard you kind of hint at Kaylee, you might know that a child, they could respond a certain way. Maybe you've observed them before, you're familiar with their triggers. And Christian, mentioning we saw you in action, just staying so calm in response to anything that might happen. But I guess my question is, how do you build that in yourself? How do you practice? Is it actually getting it wrong in the moment with the child, or is it like rehearsing with another adult? Like, how do you practice this sense of, oh my gosh, they just did blank? And instead of showing what I just showed on my face, like staying calm and not letting that energy radiate in shock, fear, disgust, whatever, but instead really modulating and responding in calm. Either one of you want to jump in with maybe how do we practice that? How do we learn?
Yeah, sure. So I do a lot of observing and interacting with a child without um, kind of giving them a lot of hard limits at first, just to kind of
Mm.
see like what they're doing. And then figuring out what those behaviors might be, observing them in like social situations, large group, lunch, all of the things. And then we start to look at, you know, if something happens, then we can talk. Maybe like we might not know in that exact moment how we're going to, um, is going to be the best thing for the child. But every day after preschool, I talk with each classroom team and we say, well, this didn't work or this did work. Let's try this next time. So that kind of helps us prepare for like we're going to expect that this might happen again and this is what we're going to try instead, or we're going to continue with this and see if that consistency with this strategy works. So that kind
Hmm.
of I feel like helps us to
Evaluating
kind
as
of
a
expect
team.
those things and then know how we're going to.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's huge. That's so huge in the classroom setting is everyone being on the same page. Because if I'm doing something and another adult is doing something different, then it's going to be confusing for the child. And every time that situation comes, we might be escalating the frustration.
Hmm. Mismatched responses by the adults, right? And children are going to pick up on that right away. So I'm staying one more time, Christian, with this just because you've had a lot of experience coaching educators through this process of limit setting during play and then in generalized. Like, what's a successful strategy of getting through that, of coaching them through that process?
Yeah, I know that my Becker's colleagues are familiar with the approach that I use in the educational setting and in the preschool setting. So I use the strategy that I'm trained in as a play therapist. It's an approach to setting limits that translates wonderfully into the early childhood setting. And so when an educator or teacher sets a limit in a manner that isn't
Oh, I think we lost you, Christian.
We saw my face. So, oh, you're back. You moved. Okay, keep going.
Where was I? I
I
lost the
know.
place.
So the limit setting starts with step one of the limit setting process.
Yes. So it's getting the child's attention. It's acknowledging their feeling. It's legitimizing their feeling. I know that you're mad, and then describe the behavior. But you pushed your friend, and now this is where I just referenced what is the new skill that the child needs to learn. Uh, you can ask for a turn, but if you choose to push a friend again, then you're going to need to choose another area to play. So a natural consequence. And so when you infuse choice into setting limits, it becomes uh, the power struggle gets eliminated. You're placing the responsibility for the behavior on the child, and 3-year-olds can learn this, but it takes time, it takes consistency from the adults end, and then it's everything that's happening before you need to set the limit that is going to hopefully result in more success as well. If the child has internalized what it feels like to make choices, where do you choose to play? You can choose dramatic play or you can choose art. So giving children those little developmentally appropriate choices throughout the day so that when you have to set a limit, they're familiar with what it feels like to make choices and they're going to understand their antenna is going to go up. My teacher is giving me a choice right now and she's going to follow through or he's going to follow through. And that not so that opportunity to self-correct is important too. Right? So you're not just reacting, you throw the block, so you need to go somewhere else. No, it's understanding that this child is having a strong feeling. They need to learn a new skill, and you're giving them an opportunity to work on impulse control, frustration tolerance, social skills, and then you praise them for the outcome. So I think if you think about limit setting in the lens of what do I need to teach this child, what do they need to learn to help them become more resilient and help them develop executive functioning skills. That's really what we're trying to do.
That was so helpful. And I feel like connects right, Sheila, to what I wanted to ask you about. How do you help a child who gets frustrated trying to express themselves?
All right. Well, again, therapeutic lens would be we have to figure out why they're having a hard time expressing themselves, right? Are they struggling again with vocabulary or language? Is there a motor planning part that's getting in the way? Do they not have a big enough sound repertoire? Is there a nervous system response that's happening, a freeze, fight, flight response? Do they have selective mutism, right? There's a plethora of possibilities of why they might be struggling. So we want to assess that. We want to figure out what's going on for them. And as they're getting whatever appropriate support, I'm going to go back to lots of opportunities outside of speech to communicate. So using a total communication approach, honoring a total communication approach, right? So that means that I'm going to honor pointing and guiding and gesturing and their eyebrows going up or down. It means that I'm going to provide them with low tech and or high tech alternative and augmentative communication to access as they are able to, and we're going to practice those skills. So we want to just value that and remember that spoken language, spoken words, they're just one part of communication, and we don't have to rely solely on that for any child. Obviously, in the context of play, we are modeling language. You had said this in your presentation. The Becker's team had said this, but we want to make sure that we're not asking a ton of questions, but that we're narrating, we're making statements, we're labeling, we're commenting. And for me, the biggest thing that I try to remind the adults that surround any student, this is both for receptive language and in this scenario where they're frustrated, is to give extra time and space, like to the point where you feel uncomfortable in the quiet, is really, really, really key. And when students arrive in the therapy sessions, before they come for their initial session, I will tell their parent, you're going to come in and you are going to want them to perform, right? That's what we want our students and our children to do. And I am going to do the exact opposite. I'm barely going to say a word. We're going to play and we're going to watch them open up and be able to share. And from that, I'm going to get the most realistic perspective on where they are with their language and vocabulary skills and what we need to layer in. So pausing to the point of discomfort is pretty key.
You saw me point at myself. That is so critical. Don't gloss over that uncomfortable, like waiting for them to do their thing. We have to do that. And you said something that we wanted to toss over to Devin. So, like, Devin, in your experience, why is narrating play sometimes more effective than asking questions?
Oh, I think that is a powerful question. And this year, I truly got the chance to test it out. I currently am in Woodbridge, Virginia, and I teach a class full of 18 students where 12 out of my 18 students are Spanish speakers. And I have a teacher assistant that helps me to facilitate those conversations because she does speak Spanish, but there is a clear language barrier between my students and I where we can't have those back and forth conversations. You know, I'm looking at them confused, they're looking at me in confusion. And when we get tasked with asking those open-ended questions, we truly just can't do it. So I solely had to rely on narrating this year. It has been my only technique to help build a relationship with my students. So I just get down with them and I just have to describe my actions and their actions. And you know, it's been more powerful than asking those open-ended questions because it helps develop that empowerment in them. So if I see them using a black crayon, oh, you're using the black crayon. Now you're using the yellow one. It looks like a bumblebee. You know, it helps just reinforce that vocabulary and helps, you know, model those observational skills that they will need to develop that language. Um, and then using self-talk or in my daily actions, you know, describing what they're doing. I started to notice that my Spanish speakers were using more English words, and becoming a little bit more empowered in their play. I think oftentimes when we ask those questions, we kind of disrupt their imaginary play. And it kind of helps them to shut down. They get hesitant, you know, they kind of don't want to play anymore. And if you just narrate and describe what you see they're doing or what you're doing, you know, it just opens up a chance for them to learn more of that vocabulary. And, you know, then after months of doing this, repeating myself when I'm in the centers, I noticed that they started using the same phrases as me. And, you know, those times when they were using full, you know, using sentences in their home language, started to mix the languages and now speaking full on English sentences to me. Oh, Miss Devin, your baby, you're rocking your baby, or you're using a purple crayon. It's truly just powerful, and I think it helps support them in that learning environment, and just allows them to expand on that, you know, their confidence over time.
I loved watching Sheila and Christian smile as you were giving that. I think like as they coach and work with educators in the classroom, they were just like, oh, if we could have more of this. Yeah, I really resonated with a lot of that. And I want to take a minute to say some of you will have to leave in 2 minutes, including Marilyn and Terry. So Marilyn, if you could put in the chat the link to the evaluation. So for those of you who have to hop exactly at 2 o'clock, you'll have the link to the evaluation. You'll be able to get your certificate. But for those who are able to hang with us, you can enter your own questions into the chat, and we would like to get through 2 or 3 more if you can hang with us, but we totally understand if you do need to go. So, great. Yes, Wendy added one. Great. Add your questions into the Q&A though, if you can. We'll also try to manage the chat, but if Marilyn can put the evaluation link, if not, I think I have it over here. And then I wanted to go to Kaylee because something that you said, Devin, reminded me of Kaylee's background in early intervention. And I'd love, this comes up all the time, I think, in almost all of our webinars, one of these questions, but how do you approach a conversation with family members when you think maybe they could benefit, the child could benefit from early intervention services? How do you even start that conversation?
So I have had a lot of practice with this in the 5 years that I was in early intervention, um, doing new referrals and things. So I'm very passionate about early childhood. And so I will typically um, start off by just saying that children's brains develop the most that they ever will in their entire life in the first 5 years of life. And so that's when we're making all of those connections. That's when we're forming habits. That's when we're learning new skills. And I also like to look at what the child's age is and give them like a snapshot of what your child should be doing at this age. Like other children, like children this age should be doing XYZ, and letting them kind of make those connections on, oh, well, my child may not be doing this yet, or my child is doing this, but tell me more about like what XYZ, and building on if they have questions and it starts to like resonate with them, like they have concerns about their child with their development. And then I give them some resources by saying, if you have concerns, of course, you should always talk to your pediatrician. But anyone can make a referral to early intervention. A child can be referred by a teacher, they can be referred by their parent, their doctor. And there's also a resource called the CDC Milestone app that parents can download so that they can track and follow their child's development as they grow to make sure that they're meeting those milestones. And yeah, so then I just kind of open it up and say, like, do you have any questions about that? Or if you think of any, you can always reach out, and we can connect you with whatever resources are in the community.
Awesome, Kaylee. Thanks so much. I actually just dropped that CDC Milestones app link into the chat. That is a huge resource for families to access, especially when you're having a hard time with that conversation and that understanding, to get it from another place and for them to be able to access it independently is a great option as well.
So, coming from a point of having a concern, I'm curious, Christian, if there is any type of play that like crosses a line of you being concerned, maybe the child is acting out pretend play violence. Is there any type of play that a child can express that you feel like that needs to be addressed with caregivers?
Sure. It's not always easy for, I think, for teachers to see in the chaos of an early childhood setting. But I would say, yeah, overly aggressive play that's emotionally intense. A lot of children play out, model what they're experiencing in their home lives, and so those are two that are just obvious, right? That we would all assume. I also look for frustration tolerance. How does a child respond when they're challenged by a task in play? And if they're struggling with frustration tolerance, of course, that's something I coach teachers in, how to support children's ability to tolerate frustration through a challenging task. But that could lead to a family meeting, a family or parent support meeting where you want to learn from the caregiver. What is your child like at home? What are you encouraging them to engage in self-help skills? Because if they're not, and they're doing everything for the child, they're not supporting that capacity. So that's a big part of the child's life that we educators can have an influence. Self-help skills in building frustration tolerance and in emotional resilience. Identification with a bad guy is play that we see a lot. So in play therapy terms, it's identification with the aggressor. Children who are exposed to domestic violence often that's a common dynamic in their play is they identify with the bad guy, or the bad guy always ends up winning within the context of the play. So that's something that I would say, let's dig a little bit deeper. I'm seeing this play in the classroom. What's going on at home? Also, play that mimics screens. See that a lot. Children that are exposed to a lot of YouTube videos or they're playing a lot of games. And we know that the young ones are playing with games that are inappropriate developmentally. But I see them reenacting characters within those mediums that is suggestive of a child that's getting way too much screen time. So that would warrant, I think, uh, meeting with a caregiver as well. I'd say that those are the big ones. And then, of course, children whose play is just developmentally not where it should be, if they're not pretending, if you're not seeing any elements of pretend, that may be suggestive of a learning or developmental delay. In a public setting, of course, we have supports for those types of for children that have those challenges. We can get child study teams involved, but in non-public school settings, it's equally important to share with caregivers so that we can coordinate and make those recommendations and help guide them in whatever supports, whether it's a speech therapy, or it's occupational therapy or physical therapy, or screening with a developmental pediatrician, et cetera. So a lot of times caregivers need that feedback from us, and we need to take care.
Yeah, because Katie, if you're okay, I'm going to go to you. Like, we're boots on the ground, the educators in the classroom with them, and often invited, fully entrenched into their play, and sometimes for extended periods, right? So that's a really unique window. But the question that I had for you that I'm hoping you can hang on with us. Thank you guys for staying a couple minutes after, because it was in a lot of questions is related to transitions. And specifically, do you have a strategy? How do you respond when several kids are dysregulated after a transition? It's not just one.
Right.
Like, how do you respond?
Okay, so I think I'm just gonna I was thinking about it and I was like, I'm just gonna walk us through. So say
Yeah.
I'm walking into, say I just took care of my needs, went to the bathroom, right? I'm coming back in and oh my goodness, several of us have dropped our baskets. We're melting down. Everybody's dysregulated, right? And so I go to my first question is safety. Is everybody safe? Because am I looking at like injured kids, or am I just looking at kids who are tired, hungry, just like very done in that moment? And let's just, role play that everything is safe, right? So I know that that means that what I need to do is address the nervous system first. I kind of think of our classroom as having a nervous system that like is connected, right? And I think of myself as being an important part of that nervous system, or any other teacher in the room. So the first thing I'm going to do is address my own nervous system needs. A lot of times for me, that means putting a hand on my chest and taking a deep breath, so that I can just go, okay, this is hard. It's really hard when you have children, multiple children who are dysregulated at the same time. Because I think the desire to address the one on like each person's needs, but you can't. You need to address the room and use strategies that help the whole group come back online. With their brain, the parts of their brain that can help them get where they need to be, right? And so what I usually do if I have a group of kids who are upset, is that after I've checked in with myself, so I know that I'm in a calm, good place to be able to address something that is just difficult, I try to immediately do something that is going to be like a little distracting, right? So a lot of times for me, that is a game, right? So I'm going to start to go, if you can hear me, tap your shoulder. If you can hear me, tap your other shoulder. But what the kids don't realize that I'm doing is I'm starting sensory input for them, right? With tapping, I'm also usually trying to do some sort of bilateral stimulation, right? That they're coming online. And so, or they're tapping their nose, and once I get and it doesn't have to be every kid, right? I'm not necessarily trying to just get those kids who are in the big meltdown coming online. I'm also trying to get the whole group, even the ones who are more regulated, to start to follow my lead a little bit, because kids actually respond to other kids even more than they're going to respond to me. So if they see their friends are starting to go, oh, Miss Katie's doing her weird tapping thing again. Okay, I guess we're doing her weird tapping thing again, and so then they start to come with me too. And once I'm able to start communicating clearly to the whole group, I'm making sure my voice is so calm, like almost like my family thinks it's like eerily calm, because I'm just like, oh my goodness. Wow, I felt in my body. Like I'm acknowledging what I felt too. Like I felt in my body. Ooh, I felt so frustrated because I couldn't hear anything and it was all too much, right? So I'm addressing me first so that they understand that it's not just them who's dysregulated, it's me too. So I'm not top down going, I need everybody to be quiet. That's not that in that, then I'm just raising the anxiety level and the nervous system. Ooh, noise is too loud. So I'm bringing it really soft and quiet. And then I'm going to try to get my friends to move towards a sensory activity. Like I might move them towards, oh, I remember we have new Play-Doh and it's so soft and squishy and it smells so good. And we might move over to a table like what we were talking about earlier, where you can stand, right? But also be doing some sensory work. Or I might invite everybody to come over and go, let's all get a drink of water and let's do cheers with our water bottles, right? So that they're then doing that sucking motion, hopefully through a water bottle with a straw, which can be super regulating for our friends who are up here and need to come back down here. So that's anything that kind of moves us towards quieting the nervous systems of at least, I mean, the majority of the room is really going to help us get back online. So then we can make a choice into maybe another quieter activity. Maybe then it's time for a book. And then usually you can kind of go, oh, okay, I think most of us are back online. And also, if there's a friend who's not able to get back online, right? You have a child who's really struggling, then I would say that that's a great time to ask for help, because that child is going to need one-on-one, like to co-regulate with someone. And whether that's you or another teacher or support worker, you're going to need extra hands, because if they're not able to come down when the rest of the class is, their needs are just greater than what you can meet in a group. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. That's just where that child is in that moment. And you can serve them best by being one-on-one. So I hope that's helpful just to walk through that.
Katie, that was amazing. Those of you who watch this on the recording, rewind, go back and listen for all like the ninja tips that were woven in there, because doing the song and the tapping and how your voice is modulated, they're not just the surface level things that you're doing. When you said you're connecting to the nervous system response, that's where all of that is. You are meeting that need for a variety of children, and but for yourself first. So thank you. Please rewind if you're watching this, go back. And because we are recording this, I really do, Devin, want to get this to you because it's closely connected. To supporting children's social emotional learning, but like empowering a child during their play. What does that look like for you in your classroom setting?
Yeah, I mean, I think you all, Erin and Rachel, touched on some key techniques. They're just beautiful examples of ways that we can empower a child during play. I think this is also one of my strengths, and it's truly because I make a priority to just build those relationships with my students and my families. Like you guys said, just do that questionnaire, the parents, the guardians, the family members, they are their child's first teachers. They are the experts on that child. So just communicate with them from the beginning of the school year throughout the rest of the year. It's essential to help build that positive relationship. And I think once you have that relationship built, you can just start to observe and just join in on their play. What are they interested in? What are their dislikes? Just really getting to know the child. So then when you are playing, if you're teaching, you know when to support that child and when to just step back and let them be in control. So I think this looks like valuing their choices. If they are making a decision for themselves where they want to play, you validate that. You know, if they are finally speaking up for themselves when they're facing a social problem, you know, praise them for that. You know, take initiative to acknowledge that. You know, you did such a great job with using your words. You said, I don't like that. Please stop. You know, I could tell that you were upset, but you took a deep breath. So just, you know, taking that initiative to notice, especially when you've been working on that skill, if they are, you know, doing the right thing, and practicing that skill, just celebrating those little wins and those big wins. And I think another big part is just creating an environment. That was one of the ones you all said, is looking at your space and making sure it's equipped, you know, with those materials, with those toys that help foster that independence and empowers the child, and just also makes them feel safe and make sure they are making safe choices. But one of my favorite things is changing my classroom around when we are, you know,
Do a
studying.
great job of that. Yep.
Yes, I change it. Rachel knows how many times I've changed the classroom around, how many times I know she has changed the classroom around many times, just to help embrace that theme and provide more opportunities for that child to feel that sense of empowerment. But I think overall, just validating their feelings, knowing those students, and just creating a space where they can direct their own learning will help develop a sense of empowerment for your students.
I love that so much. I think that's the perfect way to end, and say, please, if any of this sparked your curiosity or really connected with you, I had a lot of feedback in the chat. Thank you for sharing that. We have a link here that goes to this webinar's landing page, but that's where you can find then the original webinars with our guest hosts, the resources they graciously shared with us. Reach out to them, follow Sheila and Christian on their channels. If Katie, Kaylee, and Devin are willing to share, we're going to connect you if you have questions from their classroom or special education early intervention perspective. Sometimes there's nothing like connecting with another person who's in your same type of setting or situation. We really hope that this January through May series has been helpful, to think about supporting regulation and social emotional learning from the whole child perspective. That was our goal. So thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure, especially those of you who hung in there so long. We really appreciate it. I'm going to hit the stop record button. But then if you have any lingering questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. And guest panelists, we have taken so much of your time. So if you need to boost you back into your day, please do that. We so appreciate you.